everyone. Welcome to our webinar on how to negotiate a job offer in academia. This event is sponsored by NISS, National Institute of Statistical Sciences. I am Esra Karim from the University of California, Riverside, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Today's webinar is jointly organized by NISS Academic Affiliates Committee and NISS Graduate Student Network. Before I introduce our speakers and talk more about today's webinar, let me briefly talk about NISS Graduate Student Network. We have established the network to create connections among graduate students from different academic institutions, which are NISS affiliates. Under this network, we have been organizing events to help students tackle challenges of graduate programs and help with their future careers. Our featured events are listed on the slide, and you can also go to our website to learn more about our events and also join our network as a member. All right, so in today's webinar, we have three distinguished speakers: Dr. Richard DeVoe from Williams College, Dr. Bramar Mukherjee from University of Michigan, and Dr. Galen Jones from University of Minnesota. Our speakers will discuss what you should do after you receive an offer, how you should choose between offers, and what factors you should pay attention to before you make your decision. After our speakers' presentations, at the end, we will have time for your questions. Before we start, let me talk a little bit about these webinar's logistics. James Rosenberger and Glenn Johnson are the hosts for this session. Attendees are view only, but we encourage you to submit your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom window. After this session, you will receive an invitation to evaluate this session, and these evaluations are very important to this, and we thank you in advance for providing your feedback through these surveys. At the end of this session, within a day or so, there will be a link to the recording of this session, as well as the slides that the speakers used on the NISS website. With that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Richard DeVoe, who is the C. Carlisle and Margaret Tippett Professor of Statistics and Chair of the Department of Mathematics and Statistics at Williams College. He is an applied statistician interested in data mining methodology and its applications to problems in science and industry. He's also a statistics educator interested in understanding how statistical concepts are best communicated. Dr. DeVoe is the author of several introductory and business statistics textbooks and is an elected member of the International Statistical Institute and a fellow of the American Statistical Association. Richard, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. First thing I have to say is what a great lineup of future events. That looks fantastic. So when you're through with us, just look forward to those things. So the three of us are currently in pretty different departments and situations. So I'm in a liberal arts college. I want to talk a little bit about before you're negotiating for a job offer. And I'm going to say something a little cynical to start, but I think it might have some resonance. I mean, if you were thinking about academics, you've made a choice between academics and industry at this point. And I think you have to think about whether you want to take a job where you're going to have a starting salary of what, 60, 70,000, and you're going to work really hard for 6 years and stress out about it all the time. And you're going to worry that you're going to get fired at the end of it, as opposed to starting for maybe 1.5 to 6 times that salary. And if you figure out how to use PowerPoint and Tableau in your first 6 months, you'll probably get a big bonus. So I say that somewhat cynically, but it's something to think about. I mean, I love academics. I wouldn't have traded it for the world, but there are costs that one should think about. The other thing I want to say a couple words about is the number of places that people are applying to these days. I wish it weren't so easy to apply, because I think in the old days, it was hard. You had to write a letter or get somebody to type a letter. You had to find an envelope, get a stamp, and actually go somewhere to mail it. Now, of course, you push a button and you can apply to 500 jobs at once. And I see a lot of people who don't think about the fit. who don't really think about it. They just see job, and they might see then a name of a place and think, oh, I'm going to apply there. But I think it's a good idea, and it will help in your negotiations if you get the job, to think about the fit of you and this department in the future, because it's important. There are big differences. So we're not going to show our slides, so I better go find mine so I remember what I'm doing. Where are those? I didn't realize we weren't going to see them. So give me a second. Hang on. Okay. I found them. Amazing. Isn't Google great? All right. So the other thing to think about, of course, we've got two people from research universities here and from different types of departments within those. And I'm in a liberal arts college. So that's one thing, obviously, to think about. To think about what balance of teaching and research you want to do. And even among research universities and among liberal arts colleges, there's a big difference. We are a very research oriented liberal arts college. Our teaching load is only 2 and 2, which isn't, maybe not even different from many research universities. So we expect our faculty to be engaged in both. In fact, the chair, when I was hired, told me that we are 51% teaching and 49% research, and the rest is service. So a lot of places say they're 50-50, but I think we're one of the places that truly is. I did send my slides. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can, unless, yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it helps, but it gives somebody something to look at besides me. That's a good thing. So let's see. So I'm not going to go to full presentation mode. Oh, maybe I am. Hang on. Okay, so now I can't do that because I have to share. You're seeing something, and if I do that,
You can go full presentation mode.
how about that? Okay. All right, so that's the first thing I talked about, and then that. And the other thing that I don't think anyone else could talk about is the difference between a public and a private university. Now, the other two speakers are from public universities. They can speak about that. I've only been at private, not-for-profit universities, and they have some singular advantages. I have to tell you, I remember a time when I wanted a little more money to do some project, and I ran into the president on the street, and I just said to him, Hank, could I possibly use this money over here to do this? And he said, sounds great. And that was that. And I think the bureaucracy is probably a little thicker at a lot of public places. So that's an advantage and something to think about. So it's really the type of place that you're looking for that I want you to think about. So, and there are other things to think about. I'm going to get to negotiation, but I really want to emphasize that while you're negotiating, I guess one thing I want to say is I'm a terrible negotiator. I'll just admit it. I'm the worst. I just bought a piano and it was overpriced and I paid it. You know, I'm just a bad negotiator. I didn't ask for anything for my job. So you shouldn't be listening to anything I say, except maybe learn from my mistakes. But there was one time I did negotiate well. It was actually my first job. It was at the University of Pennsylvania. And the reason I negotiated well is I really didn't care. I wasn't sure I wanted the job. And it drove the guy who was offering the job crazy, because until I got what I wanted, I was just willing to walk out and say, nope, not going to work for me. So one thing is, if you decided this is your dream job, that's going to be tougher because you're going to be already completely invested in it. So that's just kind of a meta idea. So just some things to think about at the level before you start negotiating. And some of these things, of course, some of these things you might be able to negotiate on, probably not the atmosphere or the mentors or research expectations. But these are all the things that I think you should be thinking about. So we all want a job. How many places did you apply to? How many places are you going to get offers from? I mean, it's nice to get one offer. Some people are lucky enough to get 2 or 3, and that puts them in a different position. Okay, let's get on to some negotiation thoughts. Salary. One thing I want to say, another meta idea is when you're negotiating, realize that the people that are hiring you are on your side. It's not something adversarial. You are actually negotiating with the administration in some sense. And the people that you're talking to, the department chair typically, is on your side. They want you there. They've decided you're the person that they want. So they want to figure out how to get you there. So I don't think many people think of it that way. They think they're negotiating against the person. They don't typically have all the power to do it. They have to go back to the administration. So these are just some things you should obviously, and you can ask right up front, I think. At Williams, we have a pretty tight formula for salary, so there's not much negotiation room. You should ask about benefits. Startup is probably the place. This is where I completely blew it in my first job. I didn't know what startup funds were, so I didn't ask for any. And then I got there and people had all this equipment and money for travel. And I kind of looked around and I said, can I have some of this? And they said, well, you should have asked for it for startup. So don't do that. Find out. And one thing to do is talk to as many junior people on your visit as possible, and especially the ones that have just recently been hired. They'll probably share some stuff with you. I mean, in all these things, I think we'll all agree on this. You shouldn't be asking for the moon and the stars, but you should be asking for what you need to make it work where you're going. So startup can be equipment, it can be some money for travel, it can be some money for students, undergraduates, or possibly graduate students. It can even be summer salary. Depends on the place. But before you ask for everything, you should probably do some research, find out what's normal. Yeah, so that's something about students. So I want to say, watch what you wish for. I mean, if you negotiate for lots of students, then realize that you're responsible for lots of students. So that's something to think about. Moving expenses, always something. Housing is interesting. Now at Williams, we have housing for junior faculty, and that's an important consideration in our town. It's nice to get started with reasonable rent right off. So that's just another benefit. Course load, that may be negotiable, may not be. I think that's probably my laundry list, and I'm sure other people are going to have completely other thoughts, but I thought we could circle back and come back to this after everybody's spoken, unless there are questions now.
Thank you, Richard, especially at the beginning, laying out the differences between industry and academia, just so people know what they're getting into in terms of money and I guess promotion too.
Well, I'll add one more story. So when my son was 12, he didn't really understand what I did. In fact, I heard another child of a friend of mine was asked in class, what does your dad do? And he said, he doesn't do anything. He just sits at his desk all day. So there's that. So my son said to me at 12, he said, Dad, let me ask you some questions. And I said, sure. And he said, so you don't really have a boss, do you? And I said, no. He said, because Frank's your chair, but he's not really your boss, if I understand it right. I said, that's right. He said, so you pretty much can work on whatever you want, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, and because of that, you get to figure out when it's due. So what the timing of that? And I said, yeah, more or less. He said, so let me get this straight. He says, you don't have a boss. You can work on what you want. You don't have any time limits. He said, why are you always so stressed out then? So that's his view and my view of academics.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there is one like advantages and disadvantages, and I'm sure other speakers will also join in. Like we don't have a boss. We choose what to work on, but then there is also disadvantages that comes along with that. So I think it's about finding out what you're passionate about. Okay, so with that, I am going to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Brahmar Mukherjee, who is the John Kalbfleisch Collegiate Professor and Chair of the Department of Biostatistics at University of Michigan. She also serves as professor at the Departments of Epidemiology and Global Public Health. She's the Associate Director for Quantitative Data Sciences at University of Michigan Rogel Cancer Center. Her research interests include statistical methods for analysis of electronic health records, studies of gene-environment interaction, Bayesian methods, and shrinkage estimation. She has co-authored more than 200 publications in statistics, biostatistics, medicine, and public health, and she has served as PI on NSF and NIH-funded grants. Dr. Mukherjee is a fellow of the American Statistical Association and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Thank you, Brahmar, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ezra. It's a pleasure. I am going to share my slides, and I'd like to tell a story. I'd like to contradict Dick a little bit to be just controversial and provocative. So money is important. Yes, salary is important. But I always think about, so most of the topic of today's seminar is about once you get a job offer, how do you negotiate? That's the place of starting point. And that's what my presentation is based on. But I do think that when you walk into a library or a bookstore and you look through the books and you flip through the pages, certain books start talking to you. And if you ever write a book, probably you'll want to write one which you like to read. So finding different outlets for our statistical talent is really personalized. Some people have some calling, that some people thrive in a structured environment of an industry. Money is incredibly important. And for some people, students are very important. And I can honestly say that I took my first job in University of Florida in 2001 with a salary of $48,000 because I loved students. And I turned down many twofold, fivefold increases in salary because I could not imagine a life without students. And every time I have thought about anything which is in NIH, where you don't have to write grants, you don't have to teach, just do research, what has stopped me from saying no to academia is students. So you all have to find that book that appeals to you and that you want to write. And there is no one job which is excellent for someone may be disastrous for another person. So we all find that place. I think it's very important to find that place, and that's a different conversation. What I am going to tell you is that if you have a job offer, and again, I'm going to mostly talk about academia, how do you handle that? So because I also tweeted about this, that I accepted that $48,000 job offer in University of Florida, thinking that we do not talk about money. Because I grew up in India, and there is a cultural connotation that at upbringing that we are here for bigger reasons, altruistic motivation. We do not talk about money. And so whatever I was given, I accepted that. And then when I'm on the other side now as a chair, I see that people are shy to ask for things and often do not navigate this process well. I often coach my junior faculty how to negotiate with me. So I see that that's a problem in our culture probably, and in terms of certain particular personalities and groups, it is also harder to assert that what your market value is, because academia is about bigger things. So I want to break that myth that academia is just about bigger things, because you have to look after yourself and you have to look after your family. So I'm going to talk about 3 stages of your career. That suppose you're a fresh PhD and you're trying to negotiate for a postdoc or faculty position, or you're finishing a PhD or postdoc looking for a faculty position, and then you're an early career faculty who is doing extremely well, and you then receive a tempting offer from another institution. The last one is very tricky because you are in a place which you love and people are trying to promote your career, but there comes something which gives you a moment of pause and reflection. So what do you do? And I'm going to talk about 3 questions. That what do you do after you receive an offer? What is a strategic process? And then how do you choose between offers and handle offer counter offer process? So it's an iterative process. How many times is okay? And then finally, I'm going to talk about what are some guiding principles for yourself. And I think also being on the other side, what's fair to the chair or the person that, or the institution that you're negotiating with. So these are going, and then again, I'll be happy to entertain any questions. So my list is much more extensive and exhaustive than Dick's, because I actually looked at an offer at a various granular level. And there are many hidden things that nobody, and if you're taking a screenshot, this is a good screenshot to take, because I put in a lot of thought into this slide that what have people asked me about? And there are certain things that when I took a job, I was not even aware that you could ask for. For example, signing and retention bonus. I did not realize that you could ask. I thought it is only practiced in industry that you can ask for a one-time signing and retention bonus, but it turns out that you can. So, so these are the different components, and I'm not going through different lists, and this is for note-taking purposes, that these are the different components of an offer. We often get very hung up on salary and startup, but there are many benefits. For example, if you have family, if you have kids, tuition benefits, whether a university gives supports the tuition and the college education of your child, is extremely important. If you're going to California, whether the university has any housing assistance or has low interest loans, these are extremely important. You may not think, like when I was 27, retirement seemed like something very, very far, but I now know that you have to start thinking about retirement from very early onwards. So this is something, and again, another thing I'm going to talk about is incredibly important for your happiness is your partner issues and dual career hires. What is the right time to bring this up? And so I'm not saying that you are going to be a cutthroat negotiator, but you have to ensure that you have all the ingredients, which is gives you the perfect launching pad to start your career when you have the most energy and the enthusiasm. And so why should you negotiate your compensation and package? Why shouldn't you be so cavalier just like me that accept whatever is given to you? As I said, that once you start at a low, it is very hard for people to give you a big negotiation, big bump to your salary unless you have a counter offer. So you should better start at a reasonable market value. And then retirement benefits depend on your base salary. So you are thinking about only 1 year, but the cumulative cost to your lifelong income could be quite substantial. So be aware of that. Finally, for me, I think that your work environment really matters, and you need time and resources for focused research, grant writing, and for self-care and family. The last year has taught us that these wellness resources are extremely important for a job. So, and I do expect that there would be lots of work from home, telecommuting requests that I would have to navigate in years to come. The post-pandemic world is not going to be the same as the pre-pandemic world. So when you negotiate for something, I always like to get ammunitions, because the chair is really an intermediary who is going to the dean to ask for you, and the chair is actually on your side. So if you do your research, for example, this is the ASS salary data, which is released every year, and you can see what the biostatistics salaries look like for each rank, and also based on your experience. So this is the tenure track faculty positions, and there are for every type of position, there is this database where you can say that what do you expect as a starting assistant professor, or you have 2 to 3 years of experience, then this is the median salary. So are your qualifications more than that? Do you have more experience, more papers, more grants? Just talk about it, know your value. And then if we actually, fortunately or unfortunately, our salaries are all public. So if you go to this website and put in my name, please don't do that. You can find out what my salary is and what the salary of every assistant professor is. So do your homework so that you know what is a reasonable ask. And then understand that there may be equity issues. There may be people in the same rank who have been at the institution for a longer time. So salary may be a part where the chair or the dean does not have too much wiggle room because of this certain reference or benchmark. Private institutions are different, where they do not have to really put forward this data, and there is some more bandwidth. when you are negotiating for a postdoc position, and you might think that there is not much to negotiate, but I think that stipends and salary may not be, again, that may be, there may be NIH cap resources, but you can ask for certain soft things, intangible things. First of all, you should really think about whether the institution or the PI is going to put forward an individual or personal development plan for you to reach that milestone, the next milestone. This is extremely important. Expenses for travel and conferences. If you are anchoring for an academic job, then you can say that I want to teach a course, a summer program, summer institute. I want to interact with the graduate students in your department. What is the framework for that? And so set yourself up for success in terms of resources, not necessarily salary. You can talk about the duration, and don't accept a one-year postdoc, because by the time you get there and figure out where to get your grocery from, you'll be applying for jobs again. So 2 to 3 years is a minimum. And think about the mentoring, think about the environment of that lab where you are going to get that personal attention and a plan to get you to your next destination. So research resources, when I'm looking at considering a job, most of the time we get focused on the department. But I think that what you often forget at the school and the institution matters. So you need to think about what is the rank of the institution, what is the rank of the school, what are some of the resources that are available to launch a good teaching career or a research career? Are there resources for grant submission? Are there boot camps for grant writing? Do they have a writing center which can help you with grants? Are there center for research on learning and teaching, which will tell you about the most innovative pedagogical innovations? Do they have pilot grants that you could compete for? Also look for major university initiatives. For example, in Michigan, we have a huge data science initiative, which really promotes and champions the careers of any incoming faculty. There's also precision health, biosciences initiative. If your work comes under that umbrella, then you have the more impetus to interact with many junior faculty in that cluster and move that movement forward. We all are doing our work to feel this part of being part of something bigger. If you're interested in DEI initiatives, then look for that DEI page. That do they have adequate attention, or is it just a checkbox for that institution? Many institutions will have prospective faculty handbook on their website. Please do take a look at that. The department, of course, you probably do a deep dive into the department and check their mission statement. So think about your position at the university in a multi-level hierarchical manner and think, how can I contribute to the bigger mission of the institution, the school, and the department? And then I think that, if you think about and as I said, biostatistics in Michigan is not an isolated entity. It is situated in this general framework where there are many centers in Michigan that we collaborate with. It's important to know, where does the department have strong ties? What is the department's relationship with other departments in the school? What about the rest of the campus? You may be interested in sociology and statistics. Is there opportunities to collaborate with that department? And then what is the professional society? What are there people who are in leadership positions in professional societies? What are the alumni look like? Does this institution have good media presence? So you need to do a deep dive into the presence of that department in the community. And then when you have the job offer, the first thing, of course, you have to do is to talk. And you have to activate and leverage your network to ask your mentors, peers, alumni of that lab, what salary is typical for an assistant professor? What resources help them to get to the next milestone, their thought process? And then what do they think about Michigan biostatistics or Williams College or University of Minnesota Statistics Department? So what do they think? So talk to people. Some do's and don'ts. I think that always involving mentors, advisors, and seeking their advice, it is a very good thing. Throughout your communication, expressing gratitude for being considered, even if you don't take that job, is very important. Prioritize. I showed you that long list. What is important to you? Is finding a job for your partner the most important thing? Salary or computing resources? Think about that. Don't. Some of the things that when you don't have a conversation with your chair, just send a very objective list of stars and moons that you are requiring without the justification. If you say that I am looking for a salary raise because I have family responsibilities and the cost of living in Ann Arbor is this high, that's a different story. And this is the ASA media, and so I'm not being unreasonable. That's a different story than just I'm asking for $10,000 more because I can. So another thing is that time extension, right? You can ask for extension on your job offer to a certain reasonable extent, but asking for repeated extension and turning the job down is not a good practice. And sometimes you'll be denied in your asks. And so don't be agitated or don't take it personally. Just believe that, trust that if they have made the offer, it's much easier for them to hire you, and they would go to any length to do that. So why do you need more startup? So again, when you are asking for $50,000 more on your startup, I think it's very good to concretize your ask and just say that I am asking this because at your institution, to support an RA, it takes this much money for one semester. I want to buy 10 nodes of the university's cluster, and I have checked this is what it is going to cost. I really am starting out with a lot of projects. I want to hire an analyst, and this is what it's going to cost. I need an editor or a medical writer for writing grants. So these are concrete things. If you put a budget item, then it's much easier for the chair to go to the dean and say, see, this person has really thought about their success and their trajectory, and we really need to support this person to reach that destination. And also ask that if I don't spend my startup in 5 years, are you going to give me an extension? Some universities take the money back if you don't spend it. And then course reduction. And typically in our university, we give one course for the first year and then 2 courses in the next years. I always tell junior faculty to ask for one more to keep it in your, not in a particular year, but to keep in the bank, so that if you ever need it in pre-tenure, you can use it. That flexibility of having a semester free of teaching, you have to negotiate that before you sign on the dotted line. And often I have to tell junior faculty to ask for that. And I do think that you can talk about other things which are really helpful, that the chair is not going to change your teaching assignment every year so that you have 5 different preparations in 5 years. There may be one person in Michigan, say Mike Benke, that you really have admired as a mentor and you'd really like to work with him. Mention that and ask about what is the existing mentoring structure. I think this is incredibly important wherever you go. Are people helping, supporting, and guiding you? And I think this is very overrated. When people used to tell me, do what makes you feel happy, I thought it's very cliche, but it's really important to judge whether people are happy. Talk, visit, learn, listen to the people who are working there, because culture and climate are really, really important. So benefits. This is something that I really did not read anything in the HR page when I accepted the job. What is the easiest way? And some people have shown me this, that you can actually book an appointment with a financial consultant with this job offer and the retirement benefits, and they'll tell you how is your finance going to look under this savings model in 10 years. And I think it's worth spending that $200 with a Fidelity consultant to do this. And then there are other things like health insurance, of course, life insurance. Many universities actually have legal insurance and dental and vision. You need to look at the whole package. People have negotiated about crazy things with me. Season ticket for football games, tickets to University Musical Society concerts, theater tickets. I want an office with a view. I want parking. So think about this before you do that. One important thing, those of you who have children or thinking about having children, what is the institution's childcare program? Often there is a long list. Is there any opportunity to put you in a priority queue? Another thing is joint appointments with another department. If you want that, if you want an appointment with bioinformatics or epidemiology, talk to the chair. So Another thing is this cultural barrier. I think you, as long as you put the reason why you need this for the career growth, all institutions actually want you to be successful. So it's okay to negotiate, and chairs are happy when they get this document from you because they need ammunition to go to the deans. Okay to share actually other offers that you may have, or some metrics and summary of that offer, that this is very attractive to me from this other university, why, and if you could please look into this. Bring up dual career situations early in the process. We are not allowed to ask, but please bring that up. And then if you are in an institution, and if you're thinking seriously about moving to another university, and this is, I'm talking about current faculty members, then, and retention, you have sort of made up your mind that if you get the offer, you'll go. If retention is not something you'll entertain, then tell that to your chair. I think as a faculty member, it's okay to assess your market value every 5 years, but every year, if you go and play that game, that's probably not okay. So when it comes to turning down that offer, this is the hardest part I find. And this is my last slide, that it is hard to turn down any offer because you have invested a lot of time in getting to know the institution and its people. But nobody, my heart has been broken so many times that there is no more room. Chairs are used to it. Nobody takes it personally. Please write a thoughtful email. You will be a part of our community, and it's a very collegial and small and connected community, that the statistics community I'm very proud of. And so I think that nobody takes it personally. Everybody appreciates the opportunity to get to know you and your research work. And then when you have multiple offers and you make that choice, do not second guess your decision. Sometimes you take the right decision, but you can always make the decision right. So this is very important. And then I think the 2 words, and actually there was this article in AAAS, and I think the 2 words which are key to a successful negotiations is be honorable and be strategic. And then I think life is waiting for you, your career is waiting for you, success is waiting for you. And these are some references, and you can have a copy of my slides. Happy to take any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bromar, for all the advice. I want to mention that 2 things actually resonated with me. Being an international student and someone from Turkey, we don't talk about money either. So that is something that I had to learn from my peers and my mentors as well, because no one talks about how much they earn, or how, like, there are no guidance in that regard as well. So that completely resonated with me. And another thing that I want to mention, that you pointed out, the immigration. And I learned actually that you can negotiate that as well, because I did it during my postdoc. So I would highly encourage people to learn about the different kind of visas if you're international, and what you can ask and what you can't ask. I think that's a really important point. Thank you for those. And our last speaker is Dr. Galen Jones. Dr. Jones is professor and director of the School of Statistics, director of the Institute for Research on Statistics and its Applications, and director of Commons for Social Science Research at the University of Minnesota. His research interests include Markov chain Monte Carlo theory and foundations of statistics, metascience, and applications in astronomy, neuroimaging, and ecology. He has served as PI on grants from NSF, NIH, and Office of Naval Research, and he's a fellow of the American Statistical Association. Galen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ezra. Let me share my screen here. I want to say that the Bromar did a super job of laying out most of the issues that are involved. And so, you know, she gave some great advice. I will say that my experience when I was searching for a job, I graduated from University of Florida in 2001 as Bromar was joining. At that point in time, I was married. I had a 5-year-old daughter, and my wife was pregnant with our second child. And I wanted a job. So even though I had to lick a stamp and put applications in the mail, I applied to 150 places. All right. Because getting the job was important to me to support my family. So there can be reasons to do more than a handful of applications, but I do in general agree that it's better to be kind of strategic and thoughtful about where you apply if that's a possibility. I want to give a caveat. All of my advice here is going to be based on my personal experience. So I should really have a very long title that says how to negotiate an academic job offer in a stat department at an R1 state university based on my personal experience. I should also add that my department is in a college of liberal arts. All the sciences and engineering are in a different place. And so I have to really think of us more like a social scientist than an engineer or a physicist or mathematician, which puts real constraints on the way we operate at times. I want to start a little bit and just talk about the recruiting process a little bit. You've probably all seen the interview at your own institutions or that sort of thing, where candidate comes and gives a job talk, meets with faculty and students and staff, and goes through that. But whenever we're interviewing people, the last meeting of the interview is with me. And during that time, I try to discuss constraints and timing, when you can expect an offer. Now, Bromar's right. We cannot ask, do you have a two-body problem? Are you married? Or things like this. Those are illegal questions, actually. But I can say, are there any constraints that I should be aware of if we should make you an offer? All right, just to get some idea. And at that point in time, you can feel free to share it, but you don't have to. There's no pressure that way. I just want the information so that I can be prepared if I'm going to make an offer. At that point, then there's a faculty meeting, and we informally contact you with the good news. Again, I'll bring up the issue, is there anything that I should know about preparing the offer that I need to take into account? At that point in time, you can bring up anything that's important to you, like a two-body problem, and that needed to be addressed, okay? Another thing that both Dick and Bromar brought up is you're not negotiating with me. I'm actually negotiating with the dean on your behalf, okay? If I'm contacting you about a job offer, that means that I want you there and I'm going to do everything I can to make it happen. So a lot like what Bromar said, I make an initial offer to my dean and he either comes back and approves it or not. Often the offers are based upon the ASA salary survey from the previous year, just like Bromar said. So use that to the best of your ability. You have to be careful. There are several different versions of the salary survey. If you're negotiating with a biostat department, you want to look at that one. And if you're not, then that would not be appropriate to compare for my department, for example. I also take into account the salary structure in the school statistics. There are faculty members that have been here for a long time that the assistant professors are sneaking up on, right? That's the phenomenon called salary compression that happens in nearly every academic department. And so you have to keep that in mind. You don't want an assistant professor making a lot more than a full professor, for example. And then it's just experience with previous offers. And if you have another offer and are willing to share it, then that can go a long way towards making sure you get something competitive. Then the offer is presented to you, and then we get to have a conversation about how to proceed from there. So I thought I would give a few details, a little bit like Bromar did, maybe a little different given that I'm in a different type of institution, about the structure of an offer. So our salary offers are for 9 months. They tend to be, I try to make them above the 75th percentile in the ASA salary survey for us. Our standard teaching load is 3 courses a year. Our dean, because we're in a liberal arts, there's a minimum of 2 years reduction in teaching, or 2 courses that you can take in any combination. I'll say a little bit more about that later, but that's the minimum. That's his starting point. And then a startup package. Some standard things in the startup package are just 2 months summer support for 2 years. some money for travel, supplies, things along those lines, buying books if you want, or subscriptions to GitHub or anything else. And we typically give the money for an RA for 1 year. Now, all that money is all lumped together at Minnesota. You don't have to use it in that exact way. You get some choice and flexibility about it. At other institutions, it's very well defined about what you can spend each little section of the money on. But this is a standard way that our junior faculty use it. Some things that are not included in Startup here, but are provided. If we're going to make you an offer, then we'll bring you and a partner back to Minnesota to just look around, look for housing, that sort of thing for a weekend or a couple days. One thing that I don't know a lot of other places do, we actually give a single semester leave after 3 years. All right, so you just get 1 semester completely off to do research. When I was interviewing, I got a really large startup package offered to me in one place, but they said, you have to buy your computer forever. You have to pay for its maintenance and everything else. At Minnesota, you get a new computer every 3 years, whether you like it or not. All right. And you have access, free access to a computing cluster. We automatically do your office setup and remodel. You have relocation expenses. Ezra and Bumar are right. Immigration for international students or international applicants can be quite expensive. And so at Minnesota, we pay for those things over the first 6 years, okay? And then standard benefits like retirement, health insurance, et cetera. And these can actually vary substantially from institution to institution. You know, retirement contributions can vary in particular. And I would second what Bramar said. Over the course of time, that can make a huge difference. Even a 0.5% different contribution to your retirement account can make a large difference in when you can retire or if you can retire later. All right, negotiating. So that's kind of the background. You have to negotiate. And I often find myself in the same situation that Bramar described, where I have to encourage people to negotiate. And this is just my personal experience, but especially female candidates, all right? They are often very reticent to actually say what they want when they should absolutely bring it up, all right? Please don't assume that the answer is just going to be no. And if it is, who cares? It's just no, right? Asking doesn't reflect badly. I mean, if there's a criterion for you that'll get you to Minnesota, then I'm often looking to see if I can meet that criteria. I would say you don't have to have another offer to ask. All right. It makes it more compelling when I make the argument to the dean, all right, potentially, if he's just matching an offer from another institution. But it's also the case that if you just say, I'll accept the offer if you provide blank, and whatever blank is, that is a powerful phrase, because then I have a very well-defined thing that I can go meet when I'm arguing with my dean. All right. Again, I'm often working under constraints imposed by higher administration. So if you ask for something, then I have a chance to go make an argument for you. But if you don't ask, then I don't really have that chance. Don't make the decision for me that I'm, you know, let me have the chance to match or compete or meet your demands if we're that interested. I will say that I agree with Dick and Bramar that you shouldn't really string people along, right? You should only do this if you're really interested in that job. If the day I call you with an offer that we're going to be making, with the news that we're going to be making an offer, if you know you're not interested in the job, I think it's a little unethical to pretend like you are just to hear me out, right? But again, that's, you know, everybody has to act according to their own utility functions. What's negotiable? Everything. All right. There's no reason why you can't ask for any of those things on the list or other things that Bramar mentioned. A couple of things that I didn't. I never thought to negotiate for football tickets. But I was coming to Minnesota, so maybe football's not quite as important as it is at Michigan.
People tried, so I'm not sure that I encourage that.
I will say parking is huge. If you can negotiate for parking, that is maybe more important than the football tickets, okay? And at Minnesota, you actually can negotiate for parking. All right, so here's some free advice, and it's worth everything you're paying for it, okay? Be respectful, but you have to look out for the best deal for yourself and your family or your significant others. It's just really important for you to keep that in mind. As long as you're respectful, Brahma and Dick are right, we're all grown-ups, we've all been told no a bunch. It's not going to be held personally against you if you ask for something and we can't give it, or if you turn us down. All right. You know, it just doesn't work that way. I want to second a couple of things they said too. The most important things are often not money, right? It is perfectly reasonable to choose a lower salary or a lower startup to be somewhere you really want to be, or to be with a group of people that really share your values. Most academics don't get rich. That's also been a theme here today. All right. On the other hand, we all typically make enough money to support our families and have a decent life. And so you have to ask yourself what's really important for you. In my experience as a junior faculty, the most important thing to ask for is time. All right. An additional teaching reduction. I said we give a minimum of 2 courses off over the first 3 years. You should absolutely ask for more. All right, because in the first few years, you're really getting your career developed. And just that time to sit around and think about things all on your own is really important at that point. You know, one thing a lot of people are surprised about is just how much more work there is to do when you're faculty than when you're a graduate student. There's teaching, there's service, there's conferences, there's just a lot more going on. And so getting that time is really important. My personal opinion is you really shouldn't make the decision based just on startup. All right, some people do, but you should almost always at least ask for a larger salary. Maybe if you can justify it in some way, that would be best. But again, even if it's an extra $1,000 now, over the course of your career, getting that extra $1,000 is going to, you know, really add up over time with raises. And finally, once you've made a decision, tell us immediately. Don't string anybody along. Just send us a polite email, but do it promptly, because, you know, while I want you to say yes, it's also useful to know that you're not coming because then I can move to the next person in line, right? And so as long as you do that in a timely, respectful way, saying no is certainly not the end of the world. Okay, I'm happy to take questions also, but that's it for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Galen. Thank you, everyone, for their presentations and for all the advice that you provided. I mean, I know this is mainly for people who are applying for jobs now, but as a junior faculty member, these were actually quite enlightening for me as well. So I would like to encourage all our attendees to submit questions for our speakers at this time to get your questions answered. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Bramar and Dick has answered some of them, but the last question from one of the attendees: is there any resources in finding an academic career? Some people suggested networking is a good source, but it's kind of impossible everyone to have this connection. I appreciate it if you share your experience or guidance in this regard. So how to find academic jobs and what to look for.
So I think that, like, I always tell my students to first, of course, start at your own institution, talk to your mentors and your professors about finding an academic job. They activate your network. I think that's very important. And then talk to the career services at your institution, because they have lots of support available in terms of looking for job posting, writing your CV, reviewing your personal statement. That's the first place to start. And then, of course, professional societies are incredibly valuable here, because not everyone has the same resources at their institution. So become engaged with ASA, NISS, the Graduate Student Association of NISS, right? So, and ENAR. So all of these professional societies can give you a home where you can tap into their career resources, but also talk to people who are facing the same situation. And also alumni network in your institution, people who have gone through the process, and particularly proximal alumni are very helpful in that regard.
Can I add a random comment to that? Not really about that, but I was just thinking about Brummer's incredible slide where she had everything that you could possibly want to think about. And not only does that show how organized Brummer is, which is something by itself, but it really points out the difference in our institutions. Because if you think about those things, 90% of those are not negotiable at Williams College. But on the other hand, let's talk about a couple of them. Leave. We don't typically negotiate on getting a course reduction, but at the same time, in your fourth year, we give a full year of support to go away to do research. So these are the things you have to do. And tuition benefit, first of all, we'll give you football tickets lifetime. You want to go to a Williams College football ticket? Well, you can be on the 50-yard line, I'll guarantee you. No problem. So that's wonderful. More seriously, the tuition benefit. The tuition benefit at Williams is half of Williams tuition anywhere for 4 children. Half of Williams tuition is about something like $30,000 now. So, and you can go to either of Brummer or Galen's institutions and not have many more expenses.
That would cover it here.
Yeah. So that's an amazing benefit. No coincidence that I have 4 children, not 5, but that's their limit. But these are really important things. I mean, it's important to do your homework to know what's in the ballpark of possibility, what's appropriate. I completely agree with both of them. Be aggressive, especially for what you need. Don't be aggressive for what you've heard other people got necessarily, but make sure it's going to work for you, but really do your homework on what is possible at that place.
So one resource as far as developing a network that I'd like to plug is I got involved in the New Researchers Conference early on in my career, and I think my first year out of school, maybe 2001 or 2, and it was super helpful for me. I made a lot of friends at the same stage of career there, and people that I'm still friends with and who I've worked with since. So that's maybe a way to start building your network, is to go to the conferences and meet people and talk to them.
I completely agree with that. I think it's also useful after you start your job to have network with your own cohort, because you go through the same struggles, and what you pay attention to for tenure or any kind of merit is also helpful in that regard as well. So we have a lot of questions. The first one is, anything in particular to consider with regard to pure research faculty positions, example at a teaching hospital or fully grant funded? Do you have any insights to that?
So I think I can take that, because I think soft money is a situation probably Williams College and Galen do not have to deal with. So I think that one thing that you can definitely, again, all of the soft things that I talked about in terms of benefits, in terms of your insurances, in terms of mentoring, I think all applies to research track faculty. I think where it is different and where I'll really negotiate is that some protected time for your methodological research. Because in the beginning, you will not have your methodological grants, and soon you will be consumed in many other people's projects, and you'll become more like a middle author statistician if you don't have that opportunity. And so that's one thing that I'd recommend protecting some time for your own research, so that for the first 3 years, so that you can invest that time to write your own leadership grant, because you want to develop that leadership opportunity. And the second thing you can negotiate is that instead of being scattered across 20 projects with 5% effort, maybe you want to really talk about consolidated larger groups where you work on something like, say, particular disease like cancer, shared resource core, or you can be part of a bigger center. So things that you're learning about the domain science are sort of consolidated, and you have a larger chunk of your effort working with a group of people instead of 20 different investigators with 5% effort. We cannot really do them with 5% effort. So be proactive about that, your collaborative portfolio and your methodological protected time. And if you like teaching, look for opportunities that maybe every 3 years you teach a course, or the university has a summer program where you can teach. So these are some of the things that I negotiate there. Hope that is helpful.
Yeah, I took a job in a stat department in part because I don't like to write those sorts of grants very much. So I don't have a lot extra to add.
So we have 2 questions related to dual career opportunities. I think we did talk a little bit about when to bring it up, but there could be some specific situations people are in. One of those situations is one of our attendees' partner is a postdoc in the life sciences and is not at a place in his career to apply for assistant professor positions. And our attendee would be likely to get an offer from a university in a city that does not have an opportunity for her partner. So if our attendee gets an offer, is it reasonable to request that the hiring department, consider the partner for a professor position as well?
So we go through this almost every year, it seems like, at Minnesota, where there's a partner hire situation. And the answer is it depends. Minnesota's a very policy-driven place, I think more so than a lot of other institutions. And so there's a partner hire policy on our webpage that anybody can go look up, actually. And so we hired somebody recently that has a partner in a different discipline, in biostats, actually. And so there's just a very well-defined procedure for doing that here. So you should bring it up, I think, is at any point that you feel comfortable discussing it. Certainly once before the official offer goes out, I would appreciate knowing about it so that I can start looking into those opportunities for you. But partner hires are a little bit complicated because it often requires the other department to be willing to hire that person, all right? So they often have to go through some sort of interview in order to get a job, a faculty position there. So the earlier you can bring that up, the better in those settings.
So even if I will give other speakers the chance, but even if the person is not looking for a job at this moment, is it okay to bring it up?
It absolutely is, because oftentimes there are postdoc opportunities or things like that that are available as partner hires, or even staff positions in some cases.
You guys have anything to add?
So yeah, again, this is so dependent on the type of institution. So nobody's going to want to apply to liberal arts colleges after I say what I'm going to say. But we have almost no ability to do that. I mean, getting another department to think about hiring somebody that isn't on the list of 100 people that want jobs in the English department, for example, is not going to happen. In fact, I negotiated very hard for somebody I wanted, and I managed to get their partner a 1-course offering in the English department, and I lost them to an institution that was able to give their partner an assistant professorship. So, that's complete. You guys at big institutions have some flexibility to find staffing, and just because of your size. So we work very hard to find solutions, but there's no way we could find a position like that usually. So it just depends.
I just want to add one point is that often I have heard from candidates that they are afraid to bring up the dual career situation because they think that when ranking the candidates, they will be disadvantaged because their case will be viewed as more complex. I can assure you that's not true. It's illegal to bring that up, and the chair actually keeps that information. And regardless of your personal or family situation, the ranking is done, and there is no problems with that. But I know that this is a common thinking that I'm not going to bring it up until I have the offer. And I think the earlier the institution knows, it is better for us to really activate our network and find that job for, and postdoc is totally okay. Like, you have to start the process way in advance, and you have to explore what opportunities exist. And one time, we were very successful in terms of hiring even the top candidates who had much better probably institutional offers because we could accommodate the couple. So I think that this is a very important thing that chairs recognize, and they were and the universities have very strong resources these days. And Michigan, also not just in Michigan, they actually have a network of other universities, Michigan State, Wayne. We have contacts and dual career programs exchanging with nearby universities, also companies. So I think you should definitely activate that network and explore opportunities for your partner if that is an important thing to you.
And it also
I couldn't agree more, Bomar. That never enters the conversation about whether you're going to get an offer or not. It just doesn't. All right.
But it helps us know what kinds of things are important to you.
Yes.
I can ask somebody the generic question, would touring the daycare facilities be of interest to you? But I can't ask anything more specific than that. So if you're straightforward with what your needs are going to be, that really does help. And it's not going to be held against you.
I think you guys bring up a very important, and in your presentations, you pointed out too, I think the one thing that stops people in negotiating is, would this put me in a disadvantageous position? Would this look bad on me? And it seems like that's actually what is preventing people from asking for things they need.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's just not the case typically.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys pointing it out because it's really important. Yeah.
I guess something Galen mentioned, I mentioned that we want you to, I mean, if we're making you the offer, we want to make this work. So, tell us what you need. I mean, that's part of it. Is that I love what you said. I mean, we are the advocators for you to the dean. I mean, they're the ones that are holding the purse string. So, if as long as it's reasonable, I mean, I can't ask for something crazy, but I'm happy to go to the mat for you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So another question is, has COVID-19 affected what is appropriate to ask for during negotiations?
Mm-hmm.
Did it have any effects?
I can tell you that telecommuting is a big ask now, that because people have gotten used to it. So I think that people are thinking about jobs and managing long distance relationships and family relationships because we have seen that. And also for international faculty with some responsibilities, what time people can spend, what are the university rules and regulations around that? Because when they're not teaching, can they conduct their research and other things in terms of Zoom, and because we have gotten used to it. So this is something I think all the universities are grappling with. It took us 3 or 4 days to figure out work from home, but we'll spend the next 1 year figuring out working from work. So,
I'll say that one issue that came up is we actually have a faculty member teaching from Beijing right now, right? And so that was part of the negotiation for us. So those are some of the issues, but I don't think materially, other than issues like that, anything COVID-19 has really affected much.
Another thing I want to mention that this has come up with our junior faculty a lot due to COVID-19 is that what kind of statistical work is important? If I spent 1 year working with the state government, just guiding them, and that's why my publication suffered, is that considered important enough in my tenure dossier? And so we have several examples where people have spent a lot of time in public engagement. And so how are we factoring that in the tenure dossier? So the reward system, I think COVID-19 has made us really take a close look at impact and what is in your CV, and how do we balance between our academic work and our social responsibilities. And so that's something that we as a community are thinking.
And that reminds me back to the fit of you in the institution. You should ask what kinds of research are respected.
Mm-hmm.
Some places, if it's not in the annals of statistics, it doesn't count. I remember going to a place and I showed them where I published and they said, oh, well, technometrics doesn't count. And I just said,
What?
if that doesn't count, I'm out of here. So, it's really important. And does it have to be methodological? Can it be applications? What does it have to be? That's an important conversation. It's not a negotiable item, but it's something that's really important before you dive in.
Mhm.
Okay, another question we have is early tenure was listed as a potential negotiable point. Under what scenarios is it appropriate, reasonable to ask for early tenure opportunities?
Well, at the University of Minnesota, you can come in and after one semester technically request to be considered for promotion and tenure. Okay. It would be foolish to do that unless your chair says you've got all this extra experience to do so. But legally and procedurally or policy-wise, you're allowed to do that. So I typically recommend that people just take the normal kind of time, the 6 years. And if you feel like you're ready to go up early, then have a conversation with your chair and your personnel committee or whoever helps make those decisions and go from there. But I don't see any reason to automatically cut off time for yourself unless there's a really compelling reason. It's just an artificial constraint in my view. Maybe others differ.
For reasons of equity, mostly, we're much more saying you can't come up early because the people that ask for it tend, it's differential across different groups. And we just decided that, you could come in as a second term assistant professor if you have lots of experience. But other than that, now it's very unlikely. And I love Galen's comment about women in negotiation. I did a salary survey at Williams years ago, and we found out that the men did make slightly more than the women. It wasn't because their starting salaries were different, but they tend to negotiate differently over time as well. And we tried to fix that. And then, of course, still men and women negotiate differently even year to year. So I absolutely encourage the women to ask for what you need and to be strong about that.
So I think I mentioned that early tenure for somebody who is actually making a lateral movement, like as a junior faculty, and they are being poached by another institution. So you have already spent 4 or 5 years as an assistant professor. That happened to me. I was in University of Florida. When I went to Michigan, I think I really wanted to find out if there is an opportunity to get promoted. Of course, they cannot write it. No institution will ever write it. But are there cases and examples where people have been promoted and made that transition in 2 to 3 years instead of waiting another 6 years because the tenure clock starts at 0? So very few institutions is going to put that in your letter that, your clock starts at like 3 years or 4 years or something like that. That's not going to happen, but you can look at examples of people. And if there is a precedence of giving people credit for the time that they spent at another institution.
Well, we do that actually, Brahmar.
Yeah. So my comment was mostly for that situation.
No, even in that situation, we will give you 2 or 3 years of credit towards that promotion. So your promotion will only be 3 years from now. Okay. Yeah. Maybe we're unusual that way. Okay, I don't actually know, but that's what I tend to discourage unless there's somebody like in their 4th or 5th year and they're making the move at that point.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same. That's what I was trying to say is that now once you've accepted the assistant professorship first term, you're probably not going to be able to come up early. But if you have extensive experience, you could come in as a second term assistant professor. So you'd be starting in year 4. I did that.
Okay.
So another question is, in an academic job, when are we allowed to ask about the relative weight of items, research, teaching, and books versus articles for tenure? So how are things are weighed and what are the merits are based on? And do liberal arts and research universities have different rules for asking about these things?
I think you should ask everybody you interview with that question, okay? You should ask the chair when you meet from them in the beginning, and every faculty member, all the junior faculty, you should ask everybody about the relative weights of what is going to get you promoted. And, you know, I'll let Dick say how liberal arts might differ about this, but yeah, we actually have different procedures. Each university has a different procedure for how to do these things. I mentioned Minnesota is a very policy-driven institution. You can actually, we have a written policy about what is required to get promoted here. Mm-hmm. And it's on the provost website, and I actually give a copy of it to everybody who interviews. It's just very concrete.
I was going to say we differ about that balance, but not about asking about it. I was going to say,
right.
It's like voting in Chicago. You should ask early and ask often. You should really be clear about what those criteria are, because those are what, you know, that's an important thing to know. Absolutely.
Yeah, so for in Michigan, for tenure track faculty, it's 40, 40, 20, 40 teaching, 40 research, and 20 service. And this is sort of written as you get the offer. But then there are little participation opportunities available if somebody is coming in with a grant or so, but on balance, it's 40, 40, 20.
Okay, so another question we have is, at what time points are we supposed to consider negotiating other than at the initial offer? I'm assuming this is also related to how many times you can negotiate as well. How many times you can counter offer. I believe these are two, these could be two dependent questions. Can we go back and forth 10 times, or is there a limit?
Oh, I don't really think so. I mean, not from my perspective. I mean, if I'm done, I'm going to tell you I'm done. Right.
I would say use your social cues. I mean,
right.
Try to see what the reaction is after you've done it maybe twice, and see whether, you know, how it was received. You know, be sensitive, be open and sensitive to that.
As long as I feel like it's making progress towards something, I think I would continue talking. But if I feel like we're not making progress towards something, then it might just be time to stop.
And somebody said, if you say, I will come if this happens, boy, that's gonna be a big plus. Oh, this is kind of a COVID question.
I agree. Yes. So should negotiations occur via email or phone? Does it matter? And I think this is also related to, should you have some kind of email or some kind of like virtual contract as well to keep track as well? So what are your advice on this one?
You know, I love personal interaction, but in terms of negotiation, email is not a bad option, because it takes the emotion out of it. It lets you just put it out there in a very different way, and it gives you time to think about it, as opposed to if somebody's right face to face. So one of the few times that I would almost prefer email over the other, if it gets down to that.
So I have a new technique that I just want to share that I have been using during pandemic, which is I always ask the candidate to create a Google Doc with their wish list. So, and then I can take a look at the wish list and I can comment that this is something maybe modified and so on. So it's a collaborative project, then becomes just the whole thing about not sending a mail to me and then me getting back. As soon as that, with that gesture, it becomes a collaborative goal. Can we achieve this together for you? And that's how I try to negotiate.
That's a good idea, Bomar.
That's great.
Thank you.
We're going to steal that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have one more question. So this came up with another student that I was talking with, and is it okay to ask for a year off if you, for instance, have a visiting assistant professor position or a postdoc position before you start your permanent position, is it okay to ask for a year off and then start the permanent position?
Yes,
Absolutely. Especially if you come. You know, if you ask for a year off and then don't come, it's viewed less well.
Yeah.
I would say it's always okay to ask about things like that. Sometimes the decisions about those things are not really up to the department, and deans have different views on these things. So they're not necessarily going to be granted, but it's always okay to ask.
Depends on the teaching needs. I mean, if we were
Exactly.
here with lots of people on sabbatical and we were expecting the person to fill in these courses, and then suddenly they said, can I have a year off? I'm not saying it's off the table, but it makes it more difficult, certainly.
Bye, Bermar. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah. Okay, so
We're
with
gonna
our
have to run too, so.
okay, yes, thank you. Okay, so I think we have answered all the questions from our attendees, and I would like to thank you both, all of our speakers, for the presentations and sharing their experiences with negotiating. And I would just like to also thank our attendees for joining in and asking questions. Following this meetup, our attendees will be receiving an email with a link to a brief survey. So please provide us some feedback with that. And then I hope that we can see you all in the future NISS activities. Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.